Hello and welcome back to Lorehammer, another titillating episode on Fulgrim and his Emperor's Children. Hey, I'm your host, Mark, and joining me we got Christian.
Hey, I'm ready to plunge the depths of Slanesh with everyone again.
Oh,
and again.
I don't like that. You keep your plunger away from all holes. Including Jordan's, who is also here with us.
Especially mine. Please and thank you.
Jot that down, especially Jordan's hole you stay away from.
It's had enough abuse already.
Well, welcome to Lorehammer. We're doing an episode on the Emperor's Children, so it's going to get goofy, get a little weird, get a little gross sometimes, I'm sure. Today we're talking about them specifically in the 30k Legion era. But before we get to that, let's just do some quick housekeeping. I have the funniest story for you. My wife's working for this company, and she's an HR person, and she's helping people with autism. Like, she'll line up caretakers for people with autism. So she was taking one course, and this course was going on about the different effects of autism and like, hey, how do you know you might have autism? And it's a slideshow, la-di-da-di-da. And then the next slide she pulls up is, well, if you're playing this, you might have autism. And sure, it's a picture of Warhammer. A bunch of people playing 40k on a tabletop, and they're like, yeah, you might have autism if you're playing this. I swear to God.
I've seen the pictures. It's all true.
This is bullshit.
That was so... Yeah. So I found out today I might have a touch of the tisms, but I've heard that you can weaponize that.
I feel deeply offended by this highly relatable content.
Yeah, we laughed and laughed and laughed. I kind of like was screen peeking on my wife, like, what are you doing over there? Wait, is that Warhammer? What are you...
Why are you looking at Warhammer at work?
Okay, well, there's my story. Hey, how's the Patreon? We're growing the Patreon a lot. It's been very cool.
Yeah, always great if you guys can support the show. You guys get benefits as we get benefits. So you can get the ad-free version for only $2.50 or video version for $5. Join the Imperial Tithe. Help us fight for the Emperor.
Absolutely.
And you might go check if you qualify for autism checks from the Canadian government and see if throw some of that our way then.
Do you play Warhammer? You could qualify.
Yeah, there you go.
For social support.
You're clearly neurodivergent. Okay. Yeah. So if you are a patron, a member of the Patreon, you can also get access to the live stream, and you can join us when we record. We also do calling guests at the very end of the episode, and you can join me for some whiskey and Warhammer. But today we don't have whiskey. We're doing beer today, a crisp one. Listen. Oh yeah.
Oh, that was sensual.
Are you getting an advertising cut, Jordan? Is that what's going on here?
Hey, I'm shilling the Patreon. So join the Patreon. Join me for a crispy one.
Help Jordan afford his crippling alcohol addiction.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, you guys. All right.
I heard a fun little Patreon tier somebody was tossing out, and it was kind of the concept of a Patreon member supporting one episode particularly. So they'd put their name on the episode, like you pay $50 and then it's like, this is your episode. I'll put your brand, your little logo in the top of all my artwork. I'll kind of put you in the notes a little bit, all that kind of stuff. And then you can kind of have an episode all for you that you can show all your friends. Look what these guys made for me. But maybe message me if you're interested in such a thing.
That would be actually pretty cool.
Because I'm interested. Yeah, like I'm interested in taking your money. For sure, definitely interested in that. But if I could scratch your back while I'm at it, even better. So
I would do it for nudes. If you want to send nudes over.
No. That's the OnlyFans, Jordan. We've been over this. You've been on it even.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Cool. So, today's episode, Emperor's Children. Let's do a little context before we get into it. The last two episodes have been about Fulgrim, and man, there's a lot of information that we covered about him. But it ultimately just boiled down to don't pick up foreign objects and then listen to them if they speak to you in a demon language and then start turning to chaos. Definitely don't do it. It's not an advisable game plan, but that's kind of what we learned from the last episode. In this episode, we're going to try not to focus too much on the history of the Emperor's Children during the 30K era, just because, like with Lionel Johnson's episode, just go listen to the Fulgrim episode. That's basically the history. The Primarch and the Legion are intertwined. One doesn't go anywhere without the other, so you can kind of really get that history and stuff from there. I do a little bit of history and origins and all that in this episode, but we're going to miss a lot, so we can cover more of like their organization, their beliefs, their combat tactics, some of those more organizational relevant things. Yeah.
Yeah. All the meteor part of their history is in those previous episodes. So go give those a listen.
Yeah. All right. Let's start up. Origins. The 3rd Legion, forged during the final stages of the Unification Wars on Terra, rose from the aristocratic courts and blood vassals of Europa, the finest sons offered as both tribute and penance to the Emperor for their ancestors' failed defiance. Their noble heritage, deeply rooted in the traditions of Terra's elite, became the core of the Legion's identity, forever shaping its path. Sent their sons begrudgingly, while others, like House Loclucius of Comarg, willingly sacrificed their firstborns to the 3rd Legion, entrusting them with an unspoken promise to be transformed into something more. In time, other noble houses followed suit, swelling the ranks of the Legion with the finest of Terran youth, each a reflection of their own lineage's pride and history and more. The 3rd Legion was not made to serve as mere shock troops, it was made to command. From the earliest days of the Great Crusade, the Legion displayed an unparalleled mastery of strategy and tactics, outshining their contemporaries in both intellect and execution. The Antarctic Clearance Campaign and the Bronze Host conquest of Nadarin stand as clear example. Victories that were, in truth, the product of the Legion's superior leadership, shaping the battlefield and crafting the Emperor's will into reality. Though their extraordinary vision and prowess, the 3rd Legions not only fulfilled but exceeded the Emperor's expectations, solidifying their place as perfect instruments of his divine authority, their pride and perfection, the very measure of success in war. It's cool that these guys were around too during the Unification Wars. I didn't think there's that many, but the 1st Legion was definitely there. The 2nd was there. The 3rd, we don't know if the 2nd was there actually, but the 3rd Legion was there. It's interesting kind of just getting this little flavor text of they mostly recruited from Europa. And I could imagine how that would affect their, kind of their mentality. You got all these highborns, you put them into war. They're fancier. They might have the fancier stuff on Terra, so they might be used to that kind of stuff. And it kind of just bleeds further into the Legion.
Yeah, I was gonna make a comment on that, on how the Legion origins on Earth, even for all the other legions too, whether that was reflected in the Legion's culture or it's just the GW authors trying to rhyme them with their origins. Another good example of the Dusk Raiders, aka the Death Guard, I believe came from somewhere in Birmingham or something, where it's really noxious and factory, overcast. So the vibes and flavors and attitudes kind of bleed into the Legions, obviously, and the style of how they fight. I get really strong French aristocracy vibes.
Yeah, they're all just in a circle in a room together, smelling each other's farts and complimenting each other.
Powdered wigs and
wafting. Oh,
does Fulgrim? He's the Primarch of the 3rd Legion, am I right? Yeah, Fulgrim. Yeah. Is his name pulled from anywhere in real world, or is it just purely made up? If you guys are aware of.
Yeah, his was one I always struggled to find anything that's actually associated with, because some of them are pretty on the nose, like Iron Hands, Ferrus Manus. But Fulgrim was always the one that was elusive. If you look at the word, I don't even remember if there was really any leads.
From a quick search, and I would not put any stock into this, it's a blend of Latin fulgar, meaning lightning, and the Spanish fulgor, Like one is spelt with a U and one is spelt with an O, and that means dazzling and bright. You know, who knows? That seems so like just out there. You're mixing Spanish and Latin to get it, but
Yeah, that seems like a stretch, but maybe. Like, I mean, if you think of him as like flashy as his theme, but yeah.
yeah. In what ways do you guys think the Third Legion surpassed the Emperor's intentions in their campaigns? In what ways? Yeah, like how do you think they kind of went about doing such things?
I don't know. Is there a lot written about like how they performed beyond kind of like the subtext that, or the little bit of text that you read there? Like they, again, Emperor's Children suffer from that. Like they're really good at like planning, for example, when you're introduced to them in the Horus Heresy series, but they don't actually show it. They just tell you, you know, oh, we're really
Sure.
good and perfection in all things and execute the perfect plan, but they never actually show you what the plan is.
Yeah,
Part of it,
yeah.
I get, is like it's hard to write what that was, because if you're not like an actual real life strategist, it might be kind of foolish or something, right? But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, like that's such a hard thing to write down. Like, how does that actually play through? It's easy for that to write down. Like, yeah, they're a brutal legion that specializes in melee warfare. Like, that's so easy to represent. But I
yeah,
get what you like. Another aspect that I was learning a lot about the Emperor's Children when doing this was just how strong their leadership ties were and how that chain goes from the top to the bottom. Um, but once again, like how does that really how does leadership really take account into the battlefield? Like there's no number necessarily that you could put down.
yeah, yeah. And you know what? That actually reminds me of a slight criticism I did have it when reading, even way back when I was reading the first Fulgrim. It was that like very tight battle plan that everyone sticks to the plan and the plan is perfect and execution is perfect. But anyone who knows anything about like real life fighting or combat, like plans fall apart pretty quick, and it's really usually the guys that are more adaptable to changing circumstances that will end up on top. So like say all you will about like perfect strategy and perfect planning, but sometimes the perfect strategy is actually imperfect and that's built into the plan, right? Otherwise, like
Sure.
hinges on this one tank surviving, and it's like, well, it got blown up in the first 15 seconds. We're kind of screwed.
Yeah. Like I imagine he has all these contingencies planned and all their men take all the time in the world to memorize all these contingencies. But yeah,
Yeah.
still like all
Yeah.
planning goes out the window when a bullet's fired.
Yeah, exactly. Now, that being said, when you like on the ground level, that is very much the case. But then when you get to like higher level, like tactics and training, like special forces, they actually like get blueprints of buildings. They build mock-ups of a raid that they're going to conduct and rehearse it over and over again. So there is something to be said, like when the most elite are doing something. But yeah, it's just hard to translate on like an open battlefield where like anything goes.
Yeah, so that's kind of their origins.
For posterity, they have a sort of purple hue to their armor and their legion, and usually with a like eagle banner of some sort, like a wing and a claw.
And there's actually they're very exceptional for having that symbolism specifically, which I think we'll probably dive into here.
Yeah, we do cover a little bit of that.
But it is
The
that is
purple's kind of cool too, like royalty of Europa, purple being royalty.
Yeah, it's a
Maybe
very
that's why they
royal
chose that color.
color.
oh, absolutely, that's why they chose that color. All right, let's get into their gene seed crisis. The Third Legion, the Emperor's Children, once stood as a testament to perfection and the Emperor's vision. Yet their early solar decades were marred by an unparalleled disaster. Following their glorious triumph at Proxima, the Legion suffered a catastrophic loss. Nearly their entire gene seed stock was destroyed. Amidst the rising tide of the Great Crusade, their legions grew in power and renown. The Third Legion's future hung by a thread. First, the gene seed reserves sent to Luna disappeared. Whether sabotaged by rebellious Selenite cults, a navigational disaster, or something more sinister, the reserves were lost, a crippling blow that weakened their ability to create new Astartes. Then, a more devastating calamity struck. A fast-acting viral blight infected the gene seed vaults on Terra, obliterating what remained. Though the Emperor and his genius saved many legions from ruin, the Third Legion was utterly stripped of its reserves. For years, the Third Legion dwindled, reliant only on the pregenoid glands recovered from their dead, a process woefully slow and insufficient. Without their Primarch to hasten regeneration, the Legion seemed doomed to wither into nothingness. But in their darkest hour, Fulgrim was found, and with him hope was reborn. From the ashes of despair, the Emperor's children would rise again, their pride undiminished and their quest for perfection unbroken.
It almost seems intentional what happens to their gene seed. Like they're the only one who kind of have this opening viral blight that happens to them. Now, I don't think it is intentional. Like who would have done it and why? But
You sound like
it's
a
interesting.
conspiracy theorist, Mark.
Ancient aliens. But either way, it happened and it had devastating effects to them where they are no longer able to make new Astartes. And the ones that they did have were not up to snuff.
How long did this blight last though?
Few solar decades. So
Okay.
the very beginning of the Great Crusade, and if they were created during the Unification Wars, maybe a couple years during then they had the blight, and then 10, 20 years into the Great Crusade.
They must have been like laggards, like lagging quite a bit behind if they were that devastated, especially during the Great Crusade.
Yeah, and like one of the ways they made up for this kind of, at one point they only had, I think, 300 Marines was the number.
Oh, wow.
But they get up to like 30,000 and then they get up to a little bit more eventually. But one of the ways they kind of counted this was this legion was often attached to other legions. They spent a lot of time with Horus and the Luna Wolves / Sons of Horus. And they also spent a lot of time with the Iron Hands and Ferrus Manus. And Fulgrim's one of those Primarchs where he kind of jumps between everyone, and no matter who he comes into contact with, people seem to like him, and they don't mind working with him either.
Yeah, I know. I was reading in the because I recently finished one of the books, False Gods, and Fulgrim is sort of presented as one of the guys who endorsed Horus as the War Master, and he was able to, because everyone respects Fulgrim so much, like all the other Primarchs sort of respect Fulgrim so much, so his endorsement was sort of the thing that helped finally give acceptance to Horus as the War Master. But I'm sort of thinking if there's like a dynamic there where like Fulgrim, perhaps his legion was so weak, and I wonder if he could have been a candidate for War Master instead of Horus, but maybe his legion was just too weak at the time. I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder about that. Like, would Fulgrim have made a good War Master? Yeah, like he has all the traits of a good leader. He's smart. He's not frivolous. He's charismatic. He's a good planner. He's an excellent warrior. And yeah, like maybe if he had a better legion, he would have been the War Master. We'll maybe learn a little bit more about that. Well, let's tuck that in the back of our mind, that thought,
Okay.
as we Great Crusade.
All right. So during the Great Crusade, the Emperor's children stood as paragons of perfection, both in their martial prowess and their adherence to the Emperor's ideals. As one of the original Legionist Astartes, their mission was to bring the Emperor's light to the darkest corners of the galaxy. The Third Legion exemplified a disciplined and noble approach to warfare, blending aesthetics with unparalleled military efficiency. Their warriors were relentless, their strategies flawless, and their victories decisive. They fought not just to conquer, but to exemplify the ideals of the Imperium, inspiring awe and reverence in those who witnessed their deeds. The Emperor's children took pride in their obsession with precision and excellence, believing that war was an art form that demanded refinement. Every movement in battle, every stratagem, and every swing of a blade was carefully honed to perfection. This drive extended to their mastery of unique tactics, such as Mariskara, a maneuver that demonstrated their philosophy of combining elegance with lethal efficiency. To the Third Legion, even the chaos of war had a rhythm and order that could be mastered. This commitment earned them a reputation as the most disciplined and dependable of the legions, capable of turning any battlefield to their advantage. And I'm assuming like this is probably, again, out of necessity, like yeah, there's a phrase I'm thinking of, I can't remember, but it's like necessity breeds innovation or something like that. Where like, yeah, if your legion has been like so decimated, you have to like rely on your smarts and your wits and your strategy like way more than just your brute force ability. That might be me reading into it, but I can just see that as like an explanation as to why they are like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, like one of the cool battles that happened in the Great Crusade for the Emperor's Children was um they only had 6 Astartes at one point, and they decided to go take a planet. So these 6 guys in Fulgrim went to a planet. They used their perfect plan and they took it over. But that involved like you were saying, that meticulous planning. Like everyone needs to be doing exactly what they need to be doing, otherwise this whole thing won't work for us.
Yeah. Yeah, and then imagine how dangerous they are once they get to like full strength of 30,000 or something,
Yeah.
Astartes or something like that. Their pride was not limited to themselves, but extended to their Primarch, Fulgrim, whose charisma and vision drove the Legion to greater heights. Fulgrim's belief in the pursuit of excellence resonated deeply with his sons, binding them in a shared purpose. The Emperor himself recognized their achievements, granting them the rare honor of bearing his personal aquila on their armor, a symbol of trust and excellence that set them apart from their peers. For a time, the Emperor's children stood as a shining example of what the Astartes could achieve, a living testament to the grandeur of the Imperium. Yet beneath their noble exterior lay the seeds of their eventual fall. The relentless pursuit of perfection fostered a arrogance that began to blind them to their limitations. The same drive that had led them to excel also created an insatiable hunger for glory and recognition. As the Great Crusade progressed, the Emperor's children became increasingly self absorbed, placing their ideals above the Emperor's will. Their pride, once a source of strength, would become a fatal flaw, one that would lead them down the dark path of corruption and depravity, forever tarnishing their legacy.
So maybe here's a good spot to jump back to Fulgrim being the War Master. We just touched a big bit on one of their key features, and that's their pride. Pride is a good thing. Well, no, it can be a good thing, but usually it's not. I take pride in my work, so therefore I'm going to do a better job. But, that can quickly get out of control. So let's say we're putting Fulgrim as War Master. And he's this prideful guy, and no one can really talk to him now all of a sudden. He just has it go to his head. And you gave him the title of War Master, so now he's really like, well, I'm the best of the best. A little bit of humility is good in a leader. So maybe that's why all his brothers are like, I don't think he should be War Master.
Yeah, knowing when you're wrong, because again, no one is perfect, even if you're really damn close, like a Primarch. Having that other person to counter you or tell you when you're wrong and being able to point out your blind spots is super important. So yeah, I can totally see that arrogance, and his brothers saying that arrogance in him, because even Horus actually built his Mournival for that reason, is to counter him, to challenge him when he thinks he might be wrong, or when he might be missing something or making a mistake. He's got his trusted advisors to put him back on the right track. That's a wise thing for a leader to do. Whereas, yeah, you can definitely see someone like Fulgrim just like, no, I'm the boss now. I know what I'm doing. You get in line.
Yeah, and like Horus too, he's strategic, like in terms of his personality, and he'll do things, even like he won't allow people to bow to him even though he's like the War Master, right? To like be humble, and he'll sort of joke around even with his Astartes, and try and like go down to their level, where yeah, you're right, I think like Fulgrim does have maybe perhaps an air of arrogance to him that would be hard for like the average Astartes to relate to.
And like, yeah, he deserves to be arrogant, Fulgrim, because like he took his chapter from nothing and rebuilt it into one of like,
Yeah,
it's not a pound for pound equal of how many planets they took compared to the other legions and stuff. But man, they were holding their weight for sure.
Yeah.
And I will say one more thing too, just about like human psychology, is that highly skilled and competent individuals, actually there is like a thing where a lot of them do have traits of psychopathy as well. Like they have very like such little empathy, they're almost psychopathic or sociopathic. And actually, just as a little aside, like my wife is a nurse, and sometimes the like highly skilled surgeons, and it's specifically surgeons, it's not just like an MD, but surgeons who like work on the unit, are like, some of them are like the biggest assholes, and have like very little bedside manner, and they're just like, they come across as very arrogant, but they're like the best of the best, right? Like in their classes they were the absolute top of their classes. They are extremely competent, to a level that is like hard for most of us to relate. And there is like a thing like, we need those people, even though they're like impossible to work with.
Yeah.
But like just that sheer competency and skill is like, that can go a long way, you know.
Yeah, and it's you see it across fields, like big time CEOs or like best in their class athletes, movie stars, like people who are at the top of their fields tend to be arrogant and tend to have that like lack of empathy or sympathy with others. So it all fits. I will say one more quick thing too, is that the Emperor's Children are very much like tragic heroes in the Greek sense, where their flaw is like from within. So like that pride leading to their downfall is a very Greek tragedy thing.
Yeah.
So,
And maybe the other little bit we'll talk about before we jump on is, we mentioned it briefly in that little portion of the read, is that they were given permission by the emperor himself to wear the Aquila on their armor, the Palatine Aquila, which is, at that point it would have only been the single-headed eagle, I believe.
No, it would be the double-headed eagle, because they would have,
I guess, it would have had the Treaty of Mars and all that.
It has already been signed.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're the only ones rocking the eagle, which is pretty standard in the future. Like most Astartes you'll see with either wings or the Aquila straight up stamped on their chest. But that didn't used to be the case. It was only reserved like the highest honor, specifically for the Emperor's Children.
It is kind of cool thinking about like their Legion order. I've been thinking a lot about that. Like, so these guys are the third guys. We don't know what the second guys were, and we know the first ones were the Angels of Death. We talked a little about on the last episode where these guys were reserved for like parade routes oftentimes, like in the very beginning of the Great Crusade. They were just like parade people, because they didn't have numbers, but they were always like, they had the perfect lockstep march and all that kind of stuff.
Armor clean. 100%.
Yeah, and it's like, their name, the Emperor's Children, they never changed it to that afterwards. That was a name that the Emperor gave them and stuff. Like, some of these details are kind of interesting to put into their numerological position. Up next, we got the Horus Heresy and what happens. During the Horus Heresy, the Emperor's Children descended from their paragons of perfection into the harbingers of excess and corruption. Their fall began with their Primarch, Fulgrim, who, in his pursuit of perfection, became ensnared in the temptations of chaos. Through a combination of hubris and ambition, Fulgrim sought ever greater heights of glory and power, which left him vulnerable to the whispers of Slaanesh, the chaos god of excess and indulgence. This corruption spread like a plague through the Third Legion, transforming them into something unrecognizable from the warriors they had once been. As the heresy unfolded, the Emperor's Children became an instrument of unimaginable destruction. No longer motivated by duty or honor, they reveled in acts of wanton cruelty and violence. Their war cries, once symbols of discipline and resolve, devolved into unhinged screams of ecstasy and bloodlust. Fulgrim led his legion in service to Slaanesh, and they embraced new and horrifying forms of warfare. The Emperor's Children no longer sought perfection in battle for its own sake, but for the pleasure it brought them, exulting in the suffering of their enemies as a twisted form of artistry. The most infamous acts during the Horus Heresy were marked by atrocities committed against both friend and foe. They turned on their former allies with ferocity that shocked even the other traitor legions. The Istvan V drop site massacre showcased their newly depravity, where they butchered loyalist Astartes with savage delight, their blades carving not just flesh but also the hope of reconciliation with the Imperium. Worlds that once admired their nobility were reduced to ash, their populations enslaved, tortured, and annihilated in grotesque displays of excess that further fed their descent into madness. It was very interesting that the Emperor's Children that during this time, they weren't going and conquering planets necessarily, like they were, but they weren't doing it for any strategic reason. They were doing it to turn them into flesh puppets or whatever they want to do with that planet's populations.
Maximum carnage or maximum pleasure. Yeah.
Other things they did were they turned on their own allies a bunch, whether it was during the Drop Site Massacre, which makes sense, but they also just kind of didn't get along with anyone. They had a huge kind of falling out with the Iron Warriors in Puerto Rabo that almost came to blows. It just seemed like while some people were in it for Horus, and what Horus kind of brought to table, the Emperor's Children quickly devolved into what's in it for us. Maybe more so than any other legion.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. And it goes to that like hedonism, right? Like now they're doing it for pleasure. They're doing it for themselves, or what can they get out of it? How can they maximize their pleasure in any interaction, right? The other thing too is like the delight they take in the slaughter is kind of off-putting even to other traders, because some of the traders are like doing it for a better cause. They might be doing something unsavory, but they have like a greater cause in mind. It's like, I'd rather not kill my brothers or cousins in other legions, but it has to be done. Even the world eaters, who are like very savage, they're angry. They do it out of spite, hatred, and pain. But it's the Emperor's Children who are like having a good time while they're slaughtering. Like they're enjoying this.
They were in a unique position too, because a lot of the Primarchs, they got corrupted kind of during the Horus Heresy or afterwards, but Fulgrim was corrupted before, and his legion was corrupted before. So when the first shots were fired on traitor or on their loyalist brethren, they were already chaos, So like you were kind of saying, some of the other ones were like, oh, whoa, we didn't know we were going this hard yet. They were already dialed up though.
Yeah, and it certainly will later become like for some other legions, right? Like they revel in the slaughter too, but it takes a while for them to get worked up to that point. Whereas like the Emperor's Children are like 110 miles an hour.
They got there.
Right out of the gate. Yeah.
It is kind of an interesting juxtaposition too, because they had gotten to the point that they were through just pure discipline and strict strategy and being very disciplined, and then once they turn to chaos, it's like they become completely unhinged and undisciplined and just like completely let themselves go, to just like kill people for pleasure, rather than any strategic purpose, is like kind of the opposite of what made them in the first place.
Yeah.
But when you have chaos on your side, I mean, you can go crazy.
The power of Khorne compels you. Or in this case, Slaanesh, but
yeah.
The power, like the just that built up energy, like in the most uptight spring is the one that's got the most energy built up in it too, right? So like
true.
When they're allowed to unleash, they're gonna unleash like all the way and go crazy.
By the end of the Horus Heresy, the Emperor's Children were no longer a disciplined and cohesive force. The Legion splintered into warbands, each pursuing its own debased vision of pleasure and power. Fulgrim, fully ascended as a demon prince of Slaanesh, abandoned his warriors to their hedonistic ruin, leaving the remnants of the Third Legion as fractured and chaotic as the dark gods they served. The heresy transformed the Emperor's Children into a cautionary tale, a legion that, in their quest for perfection, succumbed to the corruption of their pride and became an eternal symbol of the dangers of unchecked ambition. Yeah, it's so funny. Like, even during the Siege of Terra, they're waging war against the Imperial Palace, and then they're all of a sudden just like, this is boring. Let's go kill some civilians. And they all just flee the battlefield and just start ganking civilians. Like they're no longer an actual functioning military.
All right. The Great Scouring. During the Great Scouring, the Emperor's children solidified their transformation into a legion of debauchery and corruption. Following the death of Horus and the Traitor Legion's defeat at the Siege of Terra, the Emperor's children, under the leadership of Fulgrim, retreated alongside their fellow traitors into the warp-touched regions of the galaxy. These were no longer the proud warriors of the Great Crusade. The Emperor's children had fully embraced the worship of Slaanesh, their pursuit of perfection perverted into an insatiable hunger for sensation, pain, and pleasure. Their retreat was marked by acts of wanton destruction, leaving a legacy of horror across the stars. The Loyalist forces pursued the traitor legions during the chaotic period, driving them from Imperial space and attempting to reclaim the worlds they had corrupted. The Emperor's children responded with terrifying ferocity, their attacks marked by a new and twisted kind of strategy. Rather than seeking victory in the traditional sense, they turned battlefields into theaters of suffering, reveling in the torment of their enemies. Civilian populations became unwilling participants in their grotesque rituals, as the Emperor's children sought to spread the influence of Slaanesh and further desecrate the Imperium's once pristine vision. Fulgrim himself was rarely seen during the Scouring, having ascended to demonhood, and left his legion to pursue his own dark ambitions. This absence splintered the Emperor's children into countless warbands, each led by a former commander or champion who sought to carve their name in infamy. These warbands became infamous for their raids on Imperial worlds, often targeting planets still recovering from the devastation of the heresy. Their campaigns were no longer about conquest, but about indulging their insatiable appetites or excess, leaving ruin and despair in their wake. By the end of the Great Scouring, the Emperor's children had been driven into the Eye of Terror alongside the other traitor legions. From their lairs within the warp, they continued to plague the Imperium as raiders and destroyers. Their influence felt far beyond their physical presence. The once proud Third Legion, paragons of excellence during the Great Crusade, were now an eternal warning of what happens when the pursuit of perfection becomes an obsession, and when pride invites corruption. The echoes of their fall would reverberate across the millennia, a dark reminder of the price of hubris and dangers of unchecked ambition. Yeah. Yeah, like we said, like strategy doesn't matter. They're not really raiding because they need stuff. They're raiding because they like it and they want to. And like that could make them more dangerous because they are not predictable. It's easy to like know where you need to invest your resources to defend like key strategic assets and stuff. But like if they're just like looting and plundering whatever they can, it's kind of hard to prepare and predict where they're going next, right?
I am sort of curious because I don't pay as much attention to the tabletop side of things. I just more read the lore. But can you play like chaos and pre-chaos Third Legion?
Yeah, like you can play Horus Heresy with the Legion before they're corrupted, and then anything 40k, and even during the Heresy, you can do them as loyalists or traitors.
Okay.
Why?
Oh, just wondering.
Thinking of an army, Jordan?
Yeah, maybe.
You like that purple paint?
Don't you tease us like that.
No, I'm definitely gonna do Eldar. Piss everyone off. So
yeah, of course. I do like how the Imperium uses the Third Legion as a lesson. I wonder what kind of lessons they do have for all the legions. Like this one's like clearly what happens if you give into pride and excess. I feel like most of the Chaos Legions aren't really talked about. You don't want to utter their names, but it's interesting. This one's kind of carried on through as a lesson.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what lesson means, right? It's not like they're teaching little kids in school about the tragic tale of the Emperor's children. It's more so like other Astartes would know and take that away. Like, hey, watch yourself, man. Like, as an Ultramarine, be careful. You don't want to be like those Emperor's children, right?
Indeed. All right, shall we get into their combat doctrine? So before their fall into chaos, the Emperor's children of the Third Legion pursued perfection with relentless dedication. Every Space Marine trained tirelessly, mastering their roles as soldiers, gunners, scouts, or snipers. Their operations left no detail to chance. Terrain, weather, and deployment strategies were meticulously analyzed to ensure flawless execution. The Emperor's children embodied not just bravery, but a deep conviction in their duty, believing that perfection in war was their highest calling. The reputation was built on a foundation of unparalleled discipline, where hesitation or inefficiency, whether from allies or brother Astartes, was intolerable. Their motto was simple: lead by example and demand nothing less than excellence. Central to their doctrine was the belief that war was an art of precision and intent. Among their many tactics, the Maris Scara, or killing cut, stood out as a testament to their philosophy. This maneuver, inspired by ancient dueling techniques, used a deceptive feint to expose an enemy's guard before delivering a perfectly timed fatal blow. It was a chilling demonstration of perfection turned to violence, foreshadowing the tragic corruption that would later consume them. So, how did the Emperor's children embody perfection in warfare before their corruption? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was just like that practice, that repetition. It's doing that same thing over and over again until you achieve perfection. Um, I I think it's like, yeah, just training and mindset's a big thing too. I suppose they got the right mindset to just always want to execute the best way of doing it. Even when we're talking about like the killing cut, and that kind of tactic where, yeah, you can cut somebody a lot of times and it might not kill them, but then you put that perfect cut right on the neck and then the battle's over. That precision, that repability, yeah, those are two big factors in how they kind of were able to perfect their warfare.
Yeah. And what you're saying there, Mark, about like repetition and like mastery of like the craft and the basics, even like anyone who's really good at something always tells you about like mastering the fundamentals, right? Like you can't be a good shooter if you don't practice all the fundamentals that make a good shooter, not just like you don't automatically just be the best at something. Even if like say you're naturally talented, it's those that like practice and hone that skill to perfection are the ones that are going to be the best at it. So that repetition and practice, and then like I know I was critical about earlier about like planning every meticulous detail. There is something to be said for that, right? Like you maybe not able to account for everything, and yes, being adaptable is important, but also like establishing your battlefield, making sure you know all the potential variables that might screw up your plan, like all those things are genuinely important, not to downplay like planning for every potential eventuality, right?
Yeah. Do you guys think that it was primarily their pride that went to their downfall, kind of led to their downfall?
I am a little. I know that's the theme of them, and that's certainly true for Fulgrim, but I don't know if it translates that well to the whole Legion. Certainly, like when you see, I'm thinking mostly of like the instance on murder when you have like Commander Eidolon of the Emperor's Children, like kind of engaging in arrogant tactics that get people killed. I could see that as being like a flaw that ends up destroying yourself. But in the sense of like their corruption, a lot of it like is demonic in the sense of like it was kind of out of their control. And again, short of Fulgrim himself is certainly the tale of pride leading to his downfall. Like other people are just victims. They were just caught in the path, right? Like if their Primarch wasn't totally corrupted, you know, maybe were they more susceptible to the whispers of Slanesh? Yeah, but it's not really said as much.
Sure.
You know?
Like, yeah. Like if Fulgrim didn't pick up that demon blade from the Lear planet, would the whispering happened? Would they have then fallen? They could have still been very prideful. But yeah, maybe not fallen then.
Yeah, I feel like Astartes too are just bred to be loyal, right? And they're indoctrinated to be loyal. So you have both a nature and nurture of loyalty built in. I feel like they're just gonna follow their Primarch wherever their Primarch goes. So you can't totally blame. I mean, you can't. I mean, I don't know if you can. Do Astartes have free will? Let's get into that discussion. But
Yes, they do.
No, they absolutely do, yeah. And especially with the Emperor's Children, one of the most famous defectors from his legion is an Emperor's Children. Saul Tarvitz is one of the few Astartes who turned on his Primarch for being a traitor.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
but there does seem to be, like, especially in the books, there does seem to be this line that gets blurred of, like, are you loyal to the Emperor or are you loyal to your Primarch? And the philosophy is you can't be loyal to the Emperor if you're not loyal to your Primarch, and then others, the philosophy is no, the Emperor supersedes anything the Primarch might say. So anyways, just something to think about.
Yeah. Skeleton in the chat says they do things in the arts and philosophy that they are certainly boasted as making them better. They not only did perfect warfare, but practiced philosophy, poetry, and more. They loved rubbing that in.
yeah, I mean, a lot of Astartes did have their things outside. Like you also see the Thousand Sons too. Like they were into like hobbies outside of their craft. I get strong like samurai vibes too with the Emperor's Children with that, where it's like perfection in all things. Doesn't matter if you're doing art or poetry, you should be just as skilled as like a swordsman or a warrior.
Yeah, to be a good warrior, first you must sharpen your mind.
Jax in the comments says Saul was a perfect Astartes. He was loyal. He was a warrior. He was humble. He was smart, kind, and loving. He cared for humanity, and when the time was right, dies for them.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of ironic too, because like his legion and their quest for perfection, he embodies that, but not in the way that the rest of the legion would see that as perfection, right? Like I 100% agree with Jax on that. And it's kind of like a tragic thing where the true perfect Astartes is actually antithetical to Fulgrim and the legion to the point that they kill each other.
Yeah.
That'll happen. All right, let's get a little more into their beliefs and what makes them tick. The pre-heresy Emperor's Children stood as paragons of perfection, their belief in the Emperor rivaling the fervor of the later imperial cult. To them, the Emperor was not a god, but the pinnacle of humanity, a beacon guiding toward all the ultimate potential. This hierarchical devotion placed the Emperor at the apex, followed by the Primarchs, Astartes officers, and finally, the Line Marines. Normal humans, though inferior, were expected to strive for excellence by emulating their superhuman betters. This absolute belief in hierarchy and perfection became their undoing. When Fulgrim, their Primarch, turned to the service of Slaanesh, the Legion followed without question. Their devotion shifted seamlessly from the Emperor to his new dark ideal as they mirrored the leader's actions, believing them to still be paragons of perfection. Before the fall, the Emperor's Children sought the perfection of human civilization through art, music, culture, believing these to be as vital as military prowess. Their weapons, armor, and very lives are crafted to reflect the pinnacle of artistry, a standard of beauty and diversity unmatched among legions. Yet this pursuit of perfection, noble as it seemed, would become their gateway to corruption. Yeah, this is interesting too. Like, when they first start out, they like art, they like culture and all that kind of stuff. But they still definitely see humans as inferior, even though they like to kind of take part of this almost human nature behavior. Yeah. You don't often see like the Astartes hate humans, or not hate, but like look down on them. Contempt. Yeah. A little bit of animosity there for sure.
Yeah, don't the Astartes, I mean, the Astartes call themselves mortal, like immortals, and humans mortal, almost like a distinction between God and not God.
Yeah.
Or divine and not divine.
Yeah, and like they have this very strict hierarchy. It's like Emperor, Primarch, Astartes, everyone else.
Yeah. But are they wrong is the question. Yeah. Purge, actually, you mentioned something earlier on about pride, and like obviously that's also very associated with like this, the fall of Satan and like the snake allegory, the sword, whispering like deceit, like the snake in the Garden of Eden kind of thing. But that is also an interesting perspective with what you guys are saying, like where the Astartes are like, if you look at them as like angelic or demigods, looking down on humanity, that does have a pretty strong parallel too there. At least for like fallen angels, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're superior than.
What exactly is perfection? Um,
Oh, just the small questions today, hey?
yeah, like, yeah, what is the perfect piece of art? Is that even a thing? In my mind, art is subjective, so there is no such thing as perfect. Like, how do you think they kind of define perfection?
Who boy, do you want like my deep philosophical answer or my 40K? This is what's true in universe answer.
Lay them both on me. I got nothing but ears tonight for you.
Yeah, well, perfection is like the lack of any flaw. It is for, I think, humanity and the real world, like unattainable. It's not something that can even be achieved. So therefore, like, it is something that's like divine or philosophical. Like, it's on a different plane. Like,
Something you strive for but never achieve.
right, you can never really achieve it. You can be really close. You can try. It doesn't say you shouldn't try, but it does exist on like a plane of like other things like morality and other like higher ideals, right? But it is unachievable for us.
Skeleton says, paint the Mona Lisa, then try to paint it with the fewest strokes possible. I guess that's perfection to him. Jack says, what is perfection? Being better than the guy next to you. Yeah, that's just being
Being
better.
better than, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, again, back to that like idealized form, right? Like, it's an ideal. It's something that is not tangible. Like, even with things that you think you could be, like, who is the best fighter in the world? Well, like, first, have you tried every fighter in the world? No, that's not possible. And then the other question is like, at what time, right? Like, someone can be better than someone else given, how old they are. Like, maybe in my youth I could have beat the crap out of you, but now that I'm 45, I'm not in my prime anymore, right? So
Now you can only beat up pumas.
right, exactly. Well, I wasn't talking about me specifically, but
Okay.
like the best fighter in the world, right? Like,
Yeah.
whoever that vague notion of perfection at this X item or thing is, like, can it, again, it goes back to that, it's an unattainable thing.
Yeah. I kind of like what you say though. Like it's a mindset and it's a goal to strive for. Doesn't necessarily mean you're ever going to achieve it. But that's kind of what you're aiming for. Just, yeah. No flaws.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't believe anything in this world can exist like that. Like, doesn't matter how good it is, everything falls short of perfection.
Yeah. Except for nature. That shit's tight.
What do you, that's the worst example you could bring up. Yeah. My wife's reading a book on cannibalism in nature, and it's just like horrific. Like, nature is not the ideal to strive towards.
Actually, also on the note of just like perfection and like art and stuff like that, I do think there's a case to be made that there is some, I don't know if objective is the right word, but like there's a, like, human psychology is drawn towards like a certain kind of art and a certain aesthetic that things look like. And so if you look at things like modern art or postmodern art, it's specifically designed to like subvert your expectation of what is beautiful or looks good, and is in large part a CIA psychological operation, but I won't get into that now. um but I think there is, I don't know, I think there is something to perfection or beauty that I think like is ingrained in like our very psychology. It could even be an evolutionary thing, and I think that's like hard to actually get away from, and to just say, well, anything can be beautiful. Like, I think that doesn't actually comport with our own like biology.
I was just saying, like, I agree with you on that front too. Is like, yeah, nailing a banana to a wall is like perfect art. Like, yeah, exactly. I do think, like, I don't know that I would. Art is one of the hardest things to talk about in regards to perfection. Like, I think there's a lot of other things we could talk about before you get to art. I do believe that subjectivity and objectivity both exist. It's kind of like that nature versus nurture thing where people try to make it one or the other, and it's like, well, it's both. The same is true for objectivity and subjectivity. People who are 100% everything is subjective completely ignore everything that is objective, but also you got to be careful when you are looking at objectivity being a real thing, that there is also room for subjectivity to exist. And then that becomes a question of like preference rather than yes, no, good, bad, right? Now, that being said, because that objectivity does exist, there are certain things that can be categorized as objective, which I would include, like Jordan said, everything about like art there, like removing different things about like styles of art and like types of art. There seems to be a trend in human behavior that recognizes a certain aesthetic to be superior than other aesthetics, right? And that goes across like different broad categories, right? So even within the realm of that kind of art that's not really art. What were we talking about? I forget the name.
Like modern art.
Yeah, like modern art. Yeah, like even within that realm, they try to quantify good and bad, right? So what is better modern art or worse modern art? But I agree with Jordan, like about all his art critique there.
I'm learning so much from you guys. You think one day I can be an artist?
I mean, okay, let me put it this way. Just get like 3 random paint colors and just splash them on your Space Marines and tell me how that looks. And just tell me
That
it's
looks
not.
like the 3 color minimum needed to play on tabletop. That's what that looks like to me.
That looks like perfection. Mark has attained it.
Right, but everyone's gonna look at that and say, "Okay, you look like a child. A child did this," and But
yeah,
it's
All
very
right.
antithetical to the Space Marine ethos, I think.
Right. Let's get into the art of war with martial traditions. The Emperor's children were paragons of martial excellence, driven by an unrelenting pursuit of perfection that elevated war to an art form. Their battles, preordained victories of flawless execution, were shaped by acute strategic brilliance and disdain for anything less than the unattainable ideal. Dueling was essential to their culture, not merely as a means of training, but a sacred ritual that embodied a warrior's essence. Their weapons, chosen with aesthetic precision, were as much symbols of their pride as tools of war. Charnable sabers, Rakathian glass glaives, and Martian-forged power blades were among the masterful creations they wielded, each blade representing the Legion's obsessive dedication to quality and perfection. Taking trophy weapons from defeated foes was a common practice, not for practicality, but to claim symbolic mastery over the enemy's spirit and skill. This relentless drive for perfection, rooted in pride and an obsession with superiority, would become the foundation for their eventual corruption, as their pursuit of the ideal blinded them to the creeping flaws within.
The dueling aspect is one of the ways that they kind of achieve that perfection. It's that repetition. It's their fighting even when they're not. The dueling was pretty cool too. They would go and spar other Astartes too and take lessons from them and implement it into their legion. The They didn't have one way of warfare. They kind of had many, they kind of had what they needed to do it. It's not like they had like the one sword stance that they used and they mastered that one. They mastered them all and took whatever advantages they could.
The Emperor's children also had that. I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but he was considered to be like the greatest sword duelist in
Lucius.
Yeah, Lucius. Yeah. So, they obviously pump out the best. So,
Yeah. That poor guy got shafted so hard. We're these old vets where we were around before the Horus Heresy books were even written. And we remember when Lucius was the best swordsman in the galaxy. But then he suffered from the Worf effect where every time a new character wanted to prove they're a good swordsman, they'd go and beat up Lucius. And it's just like this benchmark of like all these characters beating up Lucius, and it's just like, oh, okay. So he's good. He's a good swordsman. I get it.
Yeah. And to be fair, there are a couple that like we know for a fact are better than Lucius. One in the chat, Sevatar, and Sigismund is probably like the number one space marine to ever exist. But Lucius is supposed to be up there, but like Mark said, he just keeps getting his ass kicked and bumped down the ranks. Another thing too that was an interesting take on that is one of the fights that Lucius has with, I believe it's Loken. There's alleged rules around their sword duels, And Loken beats Lucius. Sorry, Jordan, for any spoilers, but he beats Lucius by just punching him in the face, or headbutting him in the face, I believe. Was the move.
I've read this. Yeah.
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 And like it's considered a dirty fighting style, but like it contrasts that like perfect planning against like
Spontaneity.
spontaneity and like dirty fighting, right? Like taking any advantage you can. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's
But you better believe Lucius mastered the perfect headbutt after Loken did it
Oh,
to
yeah.
him. He was practicing in his bedroom, smashing his face into the
that's why his
mirror.
face is all messed up.
This is true.
His
This is
headbutting
the
stuff.
way.
This is lore. It's canon. The other thing too is like there is a huge focus on melee combat, obviously, because it's 40k, but they're mastering everything. They're mastering their bolt guns. Like their snipers are the best snipers. Their reloads are flawless. Their, precision is like 110%, right? Like they are across the board trying to perfect every style of warfare. Their artillery are like totally accurate and like fast reload and everything. Like everything they train. Yep.
Does it kind of say if there is much turnover? Maybe turnover is not the right word, but like, would the melee squad ever then go pick up and master the las gun or the las rifle or a las cannon? I mean,
yeah.
Like, was there much weapon swapping in this Legion, or was like, this is my weapon, I'm gonna always use this weapon?
That's always something that was dodgy to me. Always, we know how it works in 40k, but it never says in the Legions how that works. We know the codex dictates that you're supposed to spend time in each kind of unit, but that the codex was written long after the Legions, right? And not even all the Legion or all the warriors follow the codex. So I don't know, and it would make sense to master one weapon. You have to spend a lot of time on that one weapon system. But at the same time, like if you're looking at it as mastering art of war generally, are you going to spend time on your bolter? Are you going to spend time on your sword, right? Like it depends, I guess, what you consider to be mastering, right? Mastering all elements of combat or mastering a very specific kind of combat. I imagine the Emperor's Children would do all of the above personally. And then whatever they're best with is kind of what they default to.
Sure.
But I don't think it's ever written anywhere.
Yeah, but it's not like you're ever gonna hand one of these guys a plasma gun. He's just like, oh man, I've never used one of these things.
Completely incompetent.
Let's turn the setting all the way up.
Yeah. How could this possibly go wrong? Yeah. Another cool thing too, obviously it goes with their aesthetic, is like the artistry in their weapons themselves, right? Like they all have very like master crafted weapons, like very like gilded and artfully created and like the best in how
filigree on the side.
Yeah. I keep going back and forth whenever I say something. I'll like contradict myself a few paragraphs down. I was saying earlier how like pride might not be at least totally evident in how the Emperor's Children fall, but one thing that I read there does make sense in that like with pride, it might not be so much your own arrogance, but your lack of willingness to see your flaws that can lead to your downfall, and that I think is big. Especially it's not so much that I'm so full of myself that I did something wrong. It's more so like I didn't see the flaws that were there that opened me up to fall later,
Yeah, I think I get that.
Yeah.
And on that note, let's get into their disgusting abominations and all that kind of good stuff. So the perfection of the flesh. The Emperor's Children were consumed by their quest, not only to achieve perfection, but to transcend it, seeking to embody an ideal beyond even the Emperor's designs. This obsession led some within the Legion to tamper with their own gene seed, augmenting their bodies with forbidden surgeries and enhancements in pursuit of perfection. These blasphemies, rooted in arrogance and pride, began long before the heresy and emerged fully in the horrors of Istvan III. At the heart of this corruption was the Legion's apothecarion, whose pride in their craft and paranoia over past failures drove them to dangerous experimentation. Fabius, their chief apothecary, epitomized this descent, turning the pursuit of perfection into a cancerous corruption. that infected the entire legion. Secret cults of augmentation formed within their ranks, where warriors willingly submitted to surgical alterations that warped their flesh and minds. In the end, it was not outside forces, but their own unchecked hubris and obsession that damned the Emperor's children, transforming their pursuit of the ideal into the very corruption that led them to ruin. So these guys are like, I mean, Astartes are sort of already transhuman, but these are like the
Next level.
transhuman of transhumans.
Yeah.
Transhuman
Some would
inception.
yeah, they were pretty wild. Like some would put in sonic weapons in their vocal cords, so they'd be able to yell at their enemy and blow their faces off. Yow! Other ones maybe do like quick little wrist surgeries that like allow them to snap their wrist just a little quicker or something like that for like a little sword movement, tighten those tendons up a bit. All types of weird body modifications. Some would pierce the part between the shaft of their penis and their butthole. And they said this gave them unlimited power, but I've yet to verify these claims. I just know
I
they
think
did
that's called the chode.
it. The taint of it all.
As a practitioner, I can say my powers have enhanced since going through the ritual.
Wow, good for you, friend. Good for you.
I do think it's kind of interesting that like the apothecaries, it's funny that they call them apothecaries just in the 40K story, because like ancient apothecaries, it was part medicine but part woo-woo magic. Yeah. So the line between like actual healing art and just magic is pretty blurry in apothecaries, but you kind of get that vibe, particularly with the Emperor's Children's apothecaries, because they sort of led the charge in and led the experimentations in this. So I don't know what you guys think of like the apothecarians' role that they played in the fall of the Legion.
It makes sense considering like their genetic, like you get a very strong streak of like overcompensating out of the Emperor's Children too, and like their flaws that almost destroyed their legion is something that they're very wary of. Again, I'm eating my own words here. Like it's very clearly linked to pride, leading to the corruption of their legion. In that, yes, the apothecaries who are responsible for the gene seed are responsible for the genetic health of their legion. This bad thing happened, so now they're ever vigilant, over vigilant about it. And then on top of that, they think they can even take it a step further and go even better than the Emperor, which again is that pride and arrogance. So they're like,
yeah, only a fool and a heretic would try to improve upon the Emperor's ultimate Astartes call and Primaris Marines.
Yeah, no, I and that is a huge problem with call. Like that should be addressed at some point. Someone should do something about that.
At some point.
Now that being said, the other question is: are Astartes the best that they can be, or can they actually be perfected? So then the question comes back to, like, were they justified to try and improve it? And then if you go back to my like,
they can be perfected by the warp, Christian.
Through the warp, all things are possible.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge conversation that maybe we won't veer too far down. But like, man, when I did the Primarch project episode, they had all these named characters involved in it, like these named scientist characters. The Emperor is there. They had a whole mountain hollowed out and dedicated to like the genetic labs. And then they went to the moon and they built more genetic labs there. And the amount of crew and people involved on the Primarch project for one guy to just come along and be like, I'll make it better. It's kind of like
arrogant, prideful,
kind of the worst. The Emperor's Children, they do it in a cool way though. They don't mess with the gene seed. They add stuff. They're adding, like I said, vocal cords that is actually like a Vox cannon. So In the post heresy, though, a lot of who they are and what they do changes. We've been talking a lot about their perfection and stuff and their precision and all that kind of stuff. But post heresy, they become very different. The Emperor's Children, once paragons of loyalty and perfection, have become a grotesque reflection of their former glory under the sway of Slaanesh. These fallen warriors now exist solely to pursue their most base desires, abandoning morality as a mere illusion. To them, chaos offers enlightenment through indulgence, with the Prince of Pleasure promising ultimate self-knowledge. I don't like that. With the Prince of Pleasure promising ultimate self-knowledge. You know your body so well, through the extreme pain and pleasure. Led astray by the Primarch Fulgrim, the Emperor's Children embraced the belief that all beings are slaves, whether to ambition, morality, or even the Emperor himself. Their descent has shattered their unity, leaving them as isolated warbands that revel in destruction. These hedonists wield their superhuman forms to indulge in excesses of cruelty and ecstasy alike, glorifying the sensations of war and bloodshed. Among their ranks, Noise Marines exemplify this corruption. Their minds reconditioned to seek rapture in deafening sound and sonic devastation. For all, pain is no longer a torment, but an euphoric fuel for the debauchery. Even their armor becomes a conduit of sensations, amplifying every strike upon them into a sublime thrill. Now unrestrained, the Emperor's Children are unmatched in their barbarity, their once disciplined methods twisted into a terrifying intensity. These monstrous hedonists remind all who face them that perfection, unchecked by humility, breeds corruption as much as power. Yeah. It is interesting that they, you need a theme. So I get why they kind of go so hard on the Sonic Marines and stuff and the Noise Marines and all that, and how that's kind of their vibe. Is there maybe a better vibe you could think of as opposed to Sound Marines, to kind of show that excess in experience? Sound is nice because you blast it and you feel it. It's all around you. You can feel it in your toe. You feel it climb up your back and stuff. Yeah, where it's maybe not quite the same with some of the other senses. You go around eating people, you're going to start eating some things that taste like shit, and that's not going to be good.
Or it is if you're into depraved activities. Yeah, that is actually a good question. And I don't know if I have an answer to it, to be honest with you, because you're gonna want to do a theme on all the senses, right? But how do you visualize that? You could have flaying or something like that, but that's not big enough to build a whole unit on, right? Eyesight, what you see, and all these little design elements I do like. I try to keep these episodes timeless, but as we know, the new Slaanesh models are out, and a lot of these elements are incorporated just into the general aesthetic of the model. So you see a lot of exposed flesh. You see things holding eyes open or stitching things closed, right? This emphasis on sensation, and not just touch, but all your senses, is subtly there throughout all the different design elements, which to me is good enough. That's a good approach. So I don't.
It's a hard one to try to talk. What kind of military asset are you gonna create around your eyesight? I do like that. Yes, like you said, sometimes they stitch their eyes open and sometimes they stitch them closed, because when you do that, then I guess all your other senses will fire up harder. So you got two ways of doing it. Cut
there's
off
also
all other senses or enhance the ones you have.
And I like both approaches. And the other thing too with cutting off too, there's a whole subset of kind of denial too, as a pleasurous activity. I'm actually working on an Emperor's Children warband where that's kind of the theme, is that they're almost cursed by Slaanesh. I might have mentioned this in a previous episode at some point, but they're denied the sense that they want. So some will have their mouths stitched closed, some eyes will be stitched shut. They'll have headgear that covers their ears. And that in itself
Yeah.
could also be a theme too, right? Like denial of senses as much as indulgence.
Sure. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm really not sure how else you would do it. They also tend to have an emphasis on close combat, like even their pre-heresy models. You always got like supreme swordsman kind of thing is like a theme.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, like swordsmanship is a very easy way to understand perfection.
yeah,
Like, oh, you didn't hit him with your sword. That's not very good. Like it's very clear.
yeah,
But like we said, it's not real. That's not a sense. It's
yeah, exactly. Like, is there a better
but
way to do that?
yeah.
I don't know.
Let's all ponder on that for a while. Maybe some people in the group chat will have some
Good
ideas on
ideas.
it, and
Yeah.
yeah.
All right.
We'll jump over now to the Legion organization, and we've broken this down into a couple different parts. We did the pre-heresy, some of their stuff there, some of their units, and then we eventually get into their post-heresy stuff as well.
All right. Let's start off with pre-heresy. The Emperor's Children, the Legion born from the idealistic vision of Fulgrim, were organized with an exacting precision that mirrored the perfectionist ethos of their Primarch. Every aspect of the Third Legion was meticulously crafted to reflect an unwavering commitment to form, function, and aesthetics. There was no room for whim or chance in the ranks of the Emperor's Children. Every action, every decision was deliberate, each part evaluated for its worth and contribution to the greater whole, be it in battle or in the grand design of the Legion. Fulgrim, ever the perfectionist, often reminded his Legion that no detail was too small to be overlooked. He believed that true excellence could only be achieved when the smallest of components are brought to their highest state of perfection. It was his philosophy that shaped the Legion, making it a paragon of formality, order, and conformity. While the Emperor's Children adopted much from the organization of the other legions during their formation, they infused their structure with their own layers of terminology, emphasis, and balance, ensuring the practices were true to the traditions of the Terran legions Astartes, but infused with their own sense of elegance.
I kind of like Fulgrim's take on perfection, and it's breaking everything down into its smallest part and making sure that's perfect. Like I just picture a machine, and you got to make sure all those gears are fitting perfectly. You got to make sure they're made of the right material that's strong enough to be able to kind of hold that all. There's so many little factors that go into it, but I kind of like that, breaking everything down into its kind of base components and then trying to make sure that's the best it can be.
Yeah, that's true. The devil is in the details, right? Is often a saying. And same with art too. Like again, mastering of the basics and the little things to eventually build up to the big things, right? Like sculpting the littlest detail in the eye of your statue that's like 50 feet tall suddenly becomes really important, making those eyes look like they're alive, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
The Emperor's Children was a study in hierarchy and ability, where every warrior, officer, and piece of equipment was placed precisely where they could contribute the most. Fulgrim's command structure was unyielding. Every soldier knew their rank, their role, and their place within the Legion. There was no fluid variances in the Emperor's Children as seen in other legions like the Luna Wolves. Every change within the Legion was deliberate, a product of careful consideration. Even the rank and honor of every warrior was explicitly defined and earned through their deeds, with the highest honors bestowed by the hand of Fulgrim himself. That is also another detail too that you always see a lot with the Emperor's Children is that very rigid hierarchy and like no, I'm a captain. Like there's no questioning orders and it goes back into that like flaw of like people not questioning you or pointing out your flaws. Command structure is so rigid and like obviously the guy who's captain earned his place. He's obviously the best man for the job, so obviously he would have no flaws, right?
Yeah, for sure.
In battle, the Emperor's Children exhibited a level of commitment and bravery that was unrivaled, driven not only by duty but by a deep-seated belief in their own superiority. This belief translated into an unshakable confidence that fueled their relentless pursuit of excellence. The Legion's formations were precise, and while there were variations in their size and function, each was the result of strategic foresight. The squad, in particular, was the basic unit of this grand design, each squad tailored for specific purposes and expected to achieve the pinnacle of efficiency and cohesion. Within the Legion, certain virtues were held above others, beliefs that were not merely shared but codified into unbreakable doctrine. Among these was the emphasis on speed. Fulgrim believed that the decisive strike, the first to move, was the key to victory. Speed in attack, in maneuver, and in reaction was valued above strength or firepower. This philosophy manifested in the Legion's heavy reliance on swift and mobile units. Jet bike-equipped Skyhunter squads, assault units with jump packs, and land speeders were the tools through which the Emperor's Children dominated. The elegance and swiftness of these units appealed directly to Fulgrim's vision. Noble warriors reminiscent of mythic champions galloping into battle with banners fluttering behind them, their armor gleaming like the finest craftsmanship.
Very nice. Purge says, in boot camp, you have to carry your food tray a certain way to build up muscle memory. Later, to use for hand grenades. It feels like the third would do similar things. It may be mundane, but things they demand. That's a crazy little thing that they make you do. Carry the food tray a certain way to help you throw hand grenades. It goes back to that breaking things down and making sure that each little part is like up to snuff, perfect.
It was not only the ideal of speed that shaped the Emperor's Children, but their refusal to engage in brutal attritional warfare that characterized other legions. The Emperor's Children, led by Fulgrim's tireless drive for perfection, avoided such tactics, knowing full well that preserving the Legion's strength was paramount. Victory through skill and elegance rather than through overwhelming force was the path they chose, and it was a path on which they excelled. Their strategic prowess was unrivaled, with every aspect of battle considered and analyzed, from terrain to logistics. Nothing was left to chance. Yeah, so obviously it's kind of like a shot at people like the Iron Warriors, who like just slog it out. They're just like, we're just going to win through just grinding the other enemy to dust, or the Death Guard to do that a lot, right? Whereas these guys are the exact opposite. They don't want to sustain unnecessary casualties. Better to get the job done fast, efficient, and clean rather than like smashing through everything with a sledgehammer and just brutalizing anyone and everyone, anything in the path. However, this devotion to perfection also carried its own risks. The Emperor's Children's meticulous nature meant that any unforeseen event could throw them into disarray. Should a key element of their strategy be compromised, their precision could falter. The devastation on Isstvan III, where the Emperor's Children were forced to purge their loyalist elements, exemplified these flaws. Though victorious in their betrayal, the losses were immense, both in warriors and vehicles. But Fulgrim, ever calculating, knew that such sacrifices were necessary for the greater glory of the Legion and pursuit of perfection. So that is something I brought up earlier, is like, if you overplan and you don't really have contingency plans, or you can't adapt very well, that can definitely be a drawback. Following the Isstvan III atrocity, the Emperor's Children were further strained, losing up to 20,000 warriors and countless vehicles. Their ranks, once vast, had been severely depleted. Yet despite the grave losses, the Legion's commitment to perfection remained. In the wake of these casualties, the Legion adapted, relying on every asset at their disposal and maintaining a strategic edge through their superior tactics and the swift execution of their plans. The gene seed experiments conducted by the renegade apothecaries like Fabius Bile only further warped the Emperor's Children, as they sought to replace their fallen numbers and enhance their Legion's strength. This resulted in physical changes to the Legionnaires, embodying the spiritual corruption of their devotion to Slaanesh. Their perfection, once a symbol of grace and elegance, had become twisted, a reflection of their inner depravity. Notably, the Emperor's Children had little use for psychers. The mutation of the human genome, after all, was seen as a flaw and imperfection, something that could not be tolerated by the Emperor's Children. Instead, the Legion embraced the Brotherhood of the Phoenix, a warrior lodge system that mirrored the structure of other legions. However, true to the Emperor's Children's nature, the Brotherhood was formal, reserved only for the highest ranking members of the Legion, maintaining the rigid hierarchy that Fulgrim instilled. I never actually clued into that they don't really use psychers. That never occurred.
Yeah, very interesting. Just not a perfect human. You heard it here first from the Emperor's Children, all you psychers out there.
Get purged twice.
Would they be the only Legion that doesn't use psychers?
There are a few for sure, but it's very rare. We could talk about the Space Wolves and how they don't use psychers, but at the same time, why would you ever want to talk about the Space Wolves?
To point out their utter hypocrisy, Mark. That's why you want.
Oh yes, yeah. Oh, they call from the power of their planet, not the warp. Well, that's not how warp fuckery works. I'll have you know.
Yeah, and technically, at one point, all legions were banned from using psychers, so that should also be noted. I do believe the Death Guard also had a strong aversion to psychers as well.
Yeah, for sure. They had the guy on the planet that Mortarion had to go up and climb the mountain to fight. He was a psyker and stuff. It was like
so
haunting him and tormenting him. So
yeah, it left a bad taste in their mouth.
Mm-hmm.
But that isn't to say that psychers also didn't exist in that legion. Callous Typhon
Yeah.
being one of them.
Yeah, ain't that true? Yeah.
But we'll get that on our Death Guard episode. We're getting it. The Emperor's children under Fulgrim's direction were a legion defined by perfection, pride, and unyielding discipline. Their beauty in battle, their speed, their relentless pursuit of excellence made them unmatched in the galaxy. Yet, like all things touched by the Prince of Pleasure, their perfection had a dark, corrupting cost. Yeah, I really like them. I do want to do an Emperor's Children Legion, like pre-heresy Legion.
Yeah, it's funny. Like sometimes I love the Legion, hate the Primarch, and this seems to be one of those cases. I do really enjoy the Emperor's Children, but then you talk. I'm not a big fan of Fulgrim, and maybe people could pick that up on the last 2 episodes. It doesn't really speak to me in any way. I like his sword. I think his sword is a more interesting character than him. I think Fulgrim's just a little bitch to a sword. But
Indeed. All right, so let's get into the command hierarchy. Fulgrim, the sublime and peerless Primarch of the Emperor's Children, upheld a command structure within his legion that was flawless as the warriors he led. At its pinnacle stood Fulgrim himself, a living embodiment of perfection and unchallenged authority. Beneath him, 10 officers of unmatched prowess, known as the Lord Commanders, governed the Legion's first 10 millennials, each serving as a cornerstone of its greatness. These exalted ranks were first bestowed during the Third Legion's rise from near annihilation, a legacy that endured unbroken to the zenith of the Great Crusade. The Lord Commanders formed a luminous inner circle around Fulgrim, each chosen to represent a pinnacle of leadership, martial skill, and noble virtue. Among these figures of renown, Eidolon, Vespasian, stood as paragons of the later years of the Great Crusade. Sanguinius, the angelic primarch of the Blood Angels, once referred to these 10 as the quote-unquote princes of war, a title that reflected their command over the most grandiose and decisive campaigns waged by the Emperor's children. Their influence extended far beyond the Legion itself. A Lord Commander was often entrusted with supreme authority over vast, multifaceted forces, commanding not only elements of other legions, but also millions of soldiers from the Imperial Army and detachments drawn from the Imperium's many militant branches. This level of trust and responsibility reflected their standing as exemplars of strategic brilliance. In the rare and unthinkable events of failure, a Lord Commander would exact the ultimate penance upon himself, sealing his disgrace with his own life. The structure of authority within the Emperor's children was an intricate and finely tuned hierarchy. Beneath the Lord Commanders lay the Praetoriat, an elite echelon comprising commanders, lieutenant commanders, masters, sub-commanders, and tribunes, both Palatine and ordinary. This structure descended further into captains, consuls, equerries, and ancients with varied responsibilities, and finally to centurions, heralds, praefectors, and sergeants who directed the legion's squads and warriors. This meticulous framework was more than mere organization. It was the embodiment of the legion's pursuit of perfection.
I do like how they don't change too many of these titles and ranks and stuff. Like they have their Lord Commanders, and that one's kind of their different thing. And yeah, we talked for a hot second about the Princes of War and stuff that they had, but a lot of like the Praetor, the Centurions, Heralds, all those sergeants, all that's kind of pretty standard in most legions. I like that they didn't change it too much.
Every Space Marine within the Third Legion revered his superiors, seeking inspiration in their leadership, doctrine, and personal example. This devotion fostered a culture that bordered on a personality cult, with Fulgrim himself revered as an almost divine figure. Beyond Fulgrim, the Emperor was exalted as the ultimate ideal. worshipped with a fervor that permeated the Legion to its very core. Such zealous loyalty did not go unnoticed. Among their peers, the Emperor's Children's obsessive pursuit of perfection was both admired and regarded with unease, particularly for its fanatical quality. Few could rival their devotion, save perhaps the word bearers themselves. That this ardent loyalty could be so easily supplanted during the days leading to the Horus Heresy defies belief, but it remains an undeniable truth. The lure of the ruinous powers and their insidious promises of corruption and excess proved irresistible even to those who once epitomized devotion. This tragic fall serves as a cautionary tale for all who seek perfection, no matter how radiant the heights achieved. The allure of corruption is a peril against which vigilance must never waver. I kind of wonder, though, does that almost make their characters a little inconsistent? If they were so loyal, like the most loyal to the Emperor, that they were the first ones to essentially fall to chaos and be so anti-empire emperor.
I think it was kind of just luck of the draw. Like, they didn't intentionally come across this demon sword. They didn't intentionally get propagandized by Lorgar. They just happened to find this sword that slowly corrupted them over many years. And then when the Horus Heresy went off, they were ready for it, you know? And that corruption of the demon blade, it happened slow, and you know, the demon blade wasn't right out the gate telling them to do horrific things. There's just small little things at first, and then it slowly escalates until you don't even realize how crazy what it is asking you to do actually is.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Without, at least the demon blade somewhat explains how they could be influenced to fall, because without it they probably wouldn't have.
I think so, yeah.
But yeah, I had a thought, but I forgot. So
I was gonna mention too, Mark, like there is a question mark on the thing of just chance and fate, knowing like how the warp operates, how the chaos gods lay their own plans, how the Primarchs have always had that touch of chaos in them. Like, was it fated or ordained, at least by Slaanesh, that they would try to corrupt Fulgrim like this? Maybe. Or was it just circumstance and happenstance that this is how it all played out? But that question
that's
is
a good
always
point.
lingering there too. Yeah.
So now we'll jump into the specialist ranks and formations. The Emperor's Children, Legion, renowned for its relentless pursuit of perfection and peerless artistry in war, naturally gave rise to a host of distinguished and elite formations. Each of these units embodied the ideals for their Legion: precision, mastery, and unyielding devotion to the craft of warfare. These were not mere warriors, they were paragons of skill, exemplars of Fulgrim's visions of perfection. So, up first in these kind of specialized ranks and formations, we have the Sun Killers. Forged the most skilled heavy weapon specialists of the Legion, the Sun Killers were the Emperor's Children answer to unyielding firepower. Armed exclusively with las cannons and of exquisite craftsmanship, these warriors delivered unparalleled support to their brethren. Their marksmanship and discipline elevated them to the status of legends, their presence on the battlefield a harbinger of destruction for any who dared oppose them. I like that. You know, you could get so precise with a las cannon just shooting a laser. Like, what's the long distance shot one of these bad boys has pulled off, one of these Sun Killers? Like 7 kilometers before the Earth started curving and they couldn't shoot any farther.
That is funny with lasers specifically, because they should be like unbelievably precise. Because there's no like drop, there's no gravitational effect on them. However, one thing that their distance is the atmosphere and like particulate and stuff, and like the fact that the laser would like weaken over a long distance.
Sure, that's a good point for sure. Okay,
but I just wanted to point that out.
In space, then, do you think it wouldn't have that same effect? Like, I guess it would, because there's so many like microparticles in space. And
in theory,
like, over as much.
Yeah, like in theory, in space, it would go on like infinitely, and then it would degrade as it encountered space-borne objects and particulate and stuff if it goes through like a gas cloud or something. But
yeah. Okay, well, learn something every day. Las cannons. They can't just shoot forever. Good to know. Wings of the Phoenician. Chosen personally by Fulgrim, the Wings of the Phoenician represent the Legion's mastery of close combat assault. Trained in the elegant yet devastating use of jump packs, these warriors were an aerial symphony of destruction. Leading them was the Eagle King, a title of Eagle King, that's so fucking gay. A title as majestic as the unit's battlefield presence. Their arrival was a vision of controlled fury, descending from the skies with the precision of a masterstroke. The Phoenix Guard. At the heart of the Legion stood the Phoenix Guard, an elite cadre of 200 warriors who served as Fulgrim's personal honor guard. Their number was a solemn commemoration. I knew that word. Commemoration of the Third Legion's rebirth, when only 200 Astartes remained to bear the Emperor's Children name. Whenever Fulgrim's tread, be it the grandest halls of terror or the bloodied killing fields of the Great Crusade, the Phoenix Guard stood as unshakable sentinels, their lives dedicated to the Phoenician. Even amidst their horrors of Larian or their betrayal of Tartarus, their loyalty never wavered, and their memory endures as a testament to the Emperor's Children early glory. I don't know if we mentioned on the last episode why they called him the Phoenician. Do you remember, Christian? Or maybe that was a couple episodes ago.
Yeah, I wasn't on the episode if you did talk about it, because I haven't talked about it, and I've been itching to talk about it, so I'm going to talk about it.
Drop it here.
Yeah, because it's very much tied with history. I always found it strange that they called him the Phoenician too, because I'm like, what's his homeworld called?
Chemios.
Yeah, Chemos. Yeah, so I was like, okay, like I thought it was going to be a play on like the people, like in real life, Phoenicia was a civilization. Tyre, Byblos, and Sidon were like its major cities, like Bronze Age civilization. They were known for the manufacture of the color purple, because purple was super rare back then, and that's why purple is like a royal color, is because back then they ground up seashells from, I think, a snail, and it was so hard and like so laborious, and like that snail only grew in large numbers in that region, that like Tyre specifically was known for creating this color. And I think the name Phoenician comes from that color. It's like either red, like wine red, or purple in Greek. And they use it to describe this whole people group, which obviously you can see that connection to the Emperor's Children with their color scheme. And then on top of it, a lot of the thematic elements of Fulgrim, like the death and rebirth of his legion, comes from like the legendary Phoenix, right? So yeah. I think that when they use the term Phoenician in the 40k sense, they're actually referring to Phoenix rather than anything to do with Phoenicia as the people group, although that they do have that very strong association with the color purple too. So I think it's like a double entendre kind of thing.
Ooh. Yeah. Okay. I didn't know about that color one. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And fun fact, the Phoenicians founded the city of Carthage, which will later go on to be the main adversary of Republican Rome before they got wrecked.
Which is the Ultramarines, which are ultramarine blue, and Fulgrim fought ultramarine blue Marinius or Reboot Gilliman and killed him.
Oh, damn! That is interesting, isn't it?
That is interesting. The more you know about useless shit, the more you can put together.
Well, there you go. Anyways, that's why they call him the Phoenician.
All that to say.
Yeah.
The Brotherhoods of the Palatine Blades. Perhaps the most illustrious of the Emperor's Children elite formation, the Brotherhood of the Palatine Blades were an ode to the art of dueling. Formed from battles against foes deemed worthy of their skill, these ephemeral units drew their ranks from the finest swordsmen of the Legion. With blades honed to perfection and reputations forged in relentless sparring, they sought the most exalted enemies on the battlefield. Their renown extended far beyond the Third Legion, with the figures like Lucius, Arcaduranan, and Aramundus carving legends during the campaigns, such as the annihilation of the Golden Kings of the Moriab Drifts. The Cacophony. In the grim departure of the Legion's earliest ideas, the Cacophony were a testament to the extremes of Fulgrim's pursuit for perfection. Conveyed by the chief apothecary Fabius Bile, These Astartes were enhanced through forbidden surgical methods and armed with psychosonic weaponry derived from Xenos technology. First unleashed during the treacherous days of Istvan's atrocities, the cacophony embodied a terrifying potential of chaos-altered Astartes. Their discordant weapons and twisted forms marked them as harbingers of noise marines to come. Yeah, they're pretty cool. One interesting thing to kind of note too is when Fabius Bile was doing all these surgical procedures and stuff, they were very much underground. They were not like open to the public. They were a secret. Fabius Bile knew if he was fucking around with this, he could face death. And it's just one more little kind of kick in the dick to Primaris Marines, where it's just like, you don't just go messing around with the Emperor's creation. Like, they all know this. It's a sensible offense.
I do also kind of get a bit of like Nazi vibes from the Emperor's Children, just with like, you know, the Nazis kind of dabbled a lot in the occult and a lot of weird occult stuff, and they also did lots of freak experiments on people
For science, though, Jordan. For science,
so just,
you wouldn't have half the
wanted a
medication
little
in your
note
pocket right now if not for the Nazis.
Yeah.
I'll have you know. I love the live
Probably,
streaming.
yeah, that's probably
People are
true.
like, don't touch that one, Mark. Just shake the head. And the final kind of unique unit that they have is the Roaring Blades. Once celebrated as the Righteous Blades, this venerable infantry unit of the Imperial Army fought with distinction alongside the Emperor's Children during the Great Crusade. Bound by oaths of fealty to Fulgrim, they epitomized mortal discipline and valor. Yet, in the shadow of treachery, they followed their masters into damnation. Renamed the Roaring Blades, they abandoned their honor and hedonistic excesses of Slaanesh, becoming the corrupted reflections of warriors they once wore. So these guys are like honorary members. Hey, they're mortals. They're just Roaring Blades, Emperor's Children. Let's do a quick search on them. Yeah, the Roaring Blade. Yeah, apparently they were just regular people from what I kind of really... It included mutants. There was little organization involved in this unit. Very cool. The Roaring Blades. Go check them out if you want to know more.
Is there an image of them?
Not that I've seen. They list this as a chaos cult as well, and a traitor guard regiment. But yeah, like the Emperor's Children definitely were like, you guys are pretty fucking perfect. Come on aboard. Yeah. So they get a little honorary mention.
You're perfect for being mortals. I could see of all the legions, it's kind of ironic because of how they do look down on humanity. But if anyone was going to incorporate like human elements, if they have to work with them, it's like, okay, this is the plan. We're incorporating you into the plan, so you're all aware of what's going to go down, so you don't screw things up for us while we're doing our plan. Like, I could see them getting incorporated officially, you know.
Sure.
All right, let's get a little bit into the post-heresy. After the conclusion of the Horus Heresy, the once perfect hierarchy of the meticulous formations of the Third Legion were shattered. The Legion, once a paragon of discipline and grace, was forever altered by its relentless struggles against the other traitor legions during the Legion Wars. The pursuit of fresh slaves to torment and indulge in only deepened their descent into madness. The Emperor's Children were scattered, broken in both purpose and structure. Yeah, that's a good point out. So amidst the scouring, you also have the interlegionary wars as well. So like their legion is taking a beating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Legion Wars is crazy. We'll touch on it real quickly just right now, since I don't have it in this episode. But it deserves its own. But a big part of that kind of story arc is cloning of Fulgrim and cloning of Horus. I think even gets a clone in there. But all the legions are kind of just battling over like, okay, so we lost the Horus Heresy. Who's our new leader? Who's going to take control of this whole kind of shindig?
Yeah. And as chaos is known to do, they start just killing each other. It's also, I guess we should mention too, kind of how Slaanesh operates a little bit as well, because I don't know if we've done really a deep dive into that. In that, like, yes, it's excess and pleasure, but also it's things like the desire for it are never really satiated. So Like that's why people keep going to more and more extremes. Kind of like drugs are often used as a good example of this. Of like you can never get quite as high as you used to get, so you kind of need to dose up more until you're like just going to like complete extremes. And that's often how Slaanesh operates and slowly corrupting you. Is it's inch by inch. I'm sure some people just jump off the cliff completely, depending on your personality type. But usually it's that slower, like, okay, that felt really good. Let's do it again. And then you do it again, and it's not as good as the last time. So you're like, okay, let's go a little further. Let's do a little more extreme. Let's, and that goes
Let's
for,
shove something in my butt this time.
yeah. Well, you weren't doing that already? That's where I start.
That's your starting point. Okay. Yeah.
No.
What's up your butt right now, I wonder?
Some foreign object I found. Lego.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like all the ridges.
All the jagged edges. Yeah, and on that note too, actually, it's not also exclusively the domain of sexuality. That's often where like the jokes and everything goes to, but it's like for everything, like indulgence in everything.
Yeah, like I often say, like my god would be Slaanesh, because I get very excessive. When I do something, if I find a new video game, that's all I'm gonna do for the next week. I just kind of pour myself fully into it.
Yeah,
I don't get laid though ever, so that's where it's different.
You should try Lego. It'll change your life.
I'll do that after the show. Thank you, Christian.
Lots of scar tissue. By the late 41st millennium, the remnants of this once proud legion had fractured into a collection of chaos space marine warbands. These factions, though born from the same bloodline, were now completely isolated, each led by a commander who cared not for the others. Each warband existed only for its own selfish desires, bound together by little more than the need for numbers to further their indulgences and atrocities. The heretic Astartes of the Emperor's Children had, in their devotion to Slaanesh, become consumed by a pathological narcissism. Their every thought, every action was devoted to the pursuit of new, ever more extreme pleasures. In their fractured state, their bonds to one another had grown tenuous at best. They fought side by side only because their collective presence allowed them to indulge in the battles and the enslaving of others, those cruel acts that fueled their insatiable need for sensation. So yeah, again, like they're selfish as individuals, they're selfish as war bands. That's why they're not reliable. It's just hedonism, man. They're just in it for themselves and whatever they can get out of it. Specialist ranks and formations. Among the most notorious of these twisted souls are the Noise Marines. These Astartes are those who have wholly given themselves over to the pursuit of sensation in its purest form, battle itself. There is not a pursuit of victory, but of excess. Over time, their power armor has been corrupted and transformed, adorned with loud hailers, shrieking vents, and organ batteries that produce cacophonous roars of unparalleled ferocity. Their very presence in the assault is an assault on the senses, deafening even their fellow space marines in proximity. Yeah, and they're kind of like an evolution on those cacophony that we mentioned back when they first fell. But it's not that they're exclusively in that domain. Like anyone can ascend to become a noise marine, it seems like.
Yeah.
I did just lose my place. I accidentally scrolled while I was talking.
These noise marines are the embodiments of sadistic indulgence, revel in the discordant sympathy of destruction. Their signature sonic weaponry makes them a force of unmatched devastation, a harbinger of violent ecstasy. To be in their presence is to be overwhelmed by their relentless drive for excess, for pleasure. To call them violent would be an understatement. They are, in every sense, the most sadistic and debauched creatures in the galaxy.
Yeah, again, like I don't know if I would... Like, Noise Marines are cool. They're cool as a unit of Slaanesh, but like to be the pinnacle of what Slaanesh could do to you or do for you, it's kind of strange.
Yeah. Yeah, like there just has to be a better kind of interpretation out there than for the
But at the
Sonic.
same time, I can't think of one.
Yeah. Weird. Yeah, like nothing, and that's the thing. There's nothing, like, it's not that I don't like Noise Marines. Like, I get it. Like, yeah, you play music really loud and you feel something, man. You play that perfect song in that perfect moment. It's nice, but it's not the peak. It's not the pinnacle.
Yeah.
There's also like I don't know if they incorporate this specifically in the Noise Marines lore, but there's also like frequencies that could like burst a human's eardrums, so like even certain frequencies or frequencies that can shatter glass, right? So there's all sorts of weaponry. I know it's not maybe it doesn't seem like the most like evil.
Yeah, like I wonder if there's a vibration you can do through noise that just makes people feel bad.
There
Like
is
so
the elusive brown note that
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you look at it that way, yeah, when you can like make people feel things by just shooting them with vibrations, that's kind of a cool power for Slaanesh to have when you're looking at it like that.
There is that infamous that I hear a lot of people talk about, and it's totally not true. Is the guy that ran the experiment playing talking
Ah.
to plants and playing sad and happy music to plants, and one plant does better and the other plant does not.
Really?
Total nonsense. That is not
Okay.
something that's ever been repeated. Oh yeah. It's a
There's
I've
story
been
that gets
singing
like
to my
repeated
plants in the
over and
garden like an
over, and people
asshole every
think that
morning
it's
is
like
what you're
totally
telling me.
true. And
Fuck.
yeah,
supports it.
I'm just saying there's not really a lot of evidence that it actually does. People have tried to repeat the experiment
There's another variation of
to
that experiment,
zero
Jordan, too, where
results.
they
It
do it on
does
like
almost
water and
nothing,
water
pretty much nothing.
crystals as it like forms, and like it all comes from the same like mystical woo
Yeah.
thing with vibrations.
Yeah,
That being said, sonic
Yeah.
what
weapons.
you really want to do is stick like a little. Sorry, Christian.
No, finish your thought. I was going to change the topic. What are you sticking in the water, Mark?
No, I'm. If you take a little piece of copper wire and you spin it like a pig's tail and you stick that in the dirt, that'll help your plants grow. Just for all you gardeners out there, we've learned tonight that you can't sing to them to make them grow, but you can definitely stick copper wire into their pots.
My dad has told me this. I've never looked into this. I don't know if I totally believe it, but I'm going to let me give you a rain check on that.
From my
I'll look into that.
electricianing understanding of the matter, it has something to do with free electrons.
Explained like magic. Yeah.
Okay. Now, can you stick a copper wire into a person and change their gene
No.
seed? Answer,
Fact check,
no,
false.
you cannot. But let's get into the gene seed. Yeah. So, from their very founding, the Third Legion of the Emperor's Children was synonymous with perfection. Their gene seed produced warriors of unparalleled physical refinement, noble bearing, and razor-sharp intellects, designed for personal achievement and relentless competition. Even minor genetic anomalies such as albinism or violet irises were seen as marks of aesthetic refinement rather than flaws. This aura of perfection made them the standard by which other space marines were judged. Excuse me. The near destruction of their gene seed during the founding only solidified their pursuit of excellence. Apothecaries demanded absolute mastery in preserving the purity of the genetic material, creating warriors with nearly zero mutations. Psychers, even when beneficial, were excluded as they detracted from the Legion's ideal of unblemished perfection. Yet this pursuit of flawlessness would become their undoing. Now, corrupted by chaos, the Emperor's children have lost the genetic purity that once defined them. Their gene seed, riddled with mutations, is unusable for creating new Astartes. When their hedonistic indulgences are set aside, they resort to stealing pure gene seed from loyalist chapters to replenish their numbers. A grim reflection of the heights from which they have fallen.
Some chimeric gene seed mixed in there.
So yeah, that's
some chimeric gene seed mixed in there, where it's loyalist mixed with some Emperor's children. It's just whatever you can kind of get your hands on.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting that they could do that with their genes mutated that way. And yeah, they made it like they actually kind of made it worse. Like, isn't that worse if you can't make any more Astartes out of those?
Yeah,
out of that gene
that's
seed.
a dead end right there. The way they kind of describe the
Yeah.
Emperor's Children gene seed in like their very early little bits when it had that like vault or whatever, it got corrupted in the vaults. They described it as like a wasting disease, and anyone who gets it kind of just slowly wastes away. So it's interesting, like it's a very different gene seed affliction than like a lack of one, where some are missing this gene seed organ. This one is like it affects the whole shebang away, and you get infected with it and you slowly kind of waste away.
It's like, oh man, prions are still a problem in 40K. That's scary.
Oh god, fucking prions. All right, well,
And so so like they steal the loyalist gene seed now in order to like
they have to
keep
a lot
them
of chaos
from completely disappearing.
being in the warp itself is a corrupting
Okay.
influence. You're like just
Gotcha.
riddling yourself with space cancers. So it's like, this is the backup plan.
Sweet space cancers.
I'm gonna get into the aesthetics, Mark. The aesthetics of
All right.
perfection.
Yeah, the look of perfection. As you can see before me, we have Christian, the prime candidate of a man, the epitome of perfection, wearing his vest and toque indoor.
It is cold.
Excuse me, no.
Well, it's too late. You're
I do
getting it.
not want
Everyone's getting it.
Christian's gene seed. Thank you very much.
One way or the other.
You get a gene seed. Oh god. The Lego that you put in your butt's like a caltrop or something, or like a tank trap. Keeps people from getting in there.
Yeah, it's more a defensive mechanism. I don't know why else you would do it.
All right, their appearance, pre-heresy colors and symbols. Before the corruption of the Horus Heresy, the warriors of the Third adorned their armor with imperial purple and gold, a testament to their elevated purpose as the Emperor's chosen. This regal coloration was more than a mere decoration. It was a symbolization, their role as the paragons of his design. Central to their heraldry was the Palatine Aquila, the Emperor's golden double-headed eagle, which they alone were permitted to wear. Granted by the Emperor himself after the triumphant succession at the Proximan betrayal, this emblem became the definitive mark of favor and excellence. The pre-heresy helms of the Emperor's Children displayed heraldry unique to their station, a privilege that filled them with immense pride. While the Aquila later became a widespread adornment among Astartes during the Great Crusade, it remained an exclusive honor for the Emperor's Children, symbolizing their unparalleled favor in the eyes of the Master of Mankind. This exclusivity amplified their sense of pride, sowing the seeds of obsession with perfection that would later consume them. The evolution of armor and aesthetics. In the early days of the Imperium, the Space Marine legions marched to war clad in Stormcloud Grey, bearing only the Raptor Imperialis as their sigil. Over time, as the legions established their identities, the Emperor's Children embraced lavish heraldry, intricate designs, and finely crafted armor, reflecting their innate drive for excellence and individual distinction. The Third Legion's armor became a canvas for their achievements. Helm crests identified ranks, while their white enamel inlays highlighted distinctions in status and heraldry. These traditions harken back to the days before the unification with their Primarch Fulgrim. Seal paper bearing the oaths of moment adorned their armor, symbolizing their unwavering commitment to duty. As the Great Crusade progressed, the Emperor's Children's war gear reached new heights of personal customization. Elaborate decorations, exquisite craftsmanship, and symbolic adornments such as the Eye of Horus denoted allegiance to the War Master and the participation in the Brotherhood of the Phoenix, a Legion's shadowy warrior lodge. The downfall and post-heresy degeneration. Degeneracy. With the advent of the Horus Heresy, the Emperor's Children shed their imperial regalia for the garish colors of Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure. Pastel hues of pink and black clashing with the vibrant and sensuous tones replace the disciplined elegance of their former selves. Wow, reading one of those times. Okay, let me just take a sip of water, and then we'll be back to my perfect reading ability. No two warriors bore the same patterns, as their armor became a chaotic expression of excess and self-indulgence. Noise Marines, wielding weapons of devastating sound, became emblematic of their forces, mirroring their descent into hedonism and depravity. Their appearance in the 41st millennium is an affront to their former glory. Armor enameled in eye-whitening purples and gaudy golds, encrusted with grotesque decorations. What flesh remains visible is pale, pierced, and adorned with needles and rings, while their deadened eyes reflect the torment of having seen too much, yet never enough. That's a cool way of describing that, actually. Yeah. Heraldry, a symbol of perfection and heresy. The badge of the Emperor's children during the Great Crusade was a golden eagle's wing, ending in a talon, a fragment of the Aquila that signified their unique connection to the Emperor. For officers, this badge grew more ornate, crafted from precious metals, with gold wings clutching purple gemstones. In their fall, the Emperor's children replaced these noble symbols with the sigils of Slaanesh, an 8-pointed star of chaos. Their armor became a blasphemous mockery of its former dignity, a testament to their descent from the epitome of perfection into the depths of heresy. Through every stage of their history, the Emperor's children remained a tragic paradox, once the embodiment of the Emperor's ideal, now a haunting reflection of the corruption that perfection left unchecked can breed. Yeah. So there we have it. The Emperor's children, their pride, their fall, their colors, their war gears, and everything in between.
When I first got into 40K, always confused me being called the Emperor's children, but being bad guys. I was always so confused. It's like, what is going on?
Yeah, I love it. Legions have shown to change their name before. You mentioned the Dusk Raiders earlier this podcast, changing it to Death Guard. Like, this is a thing. This is a precedent that's been set, but they decided, no.
Yeah,
we're keeping that.
Well, it's almost like a blasphemous, like, FU to the Emperor, right? Like,
yeah, like they're never gonna let anyone live it down that they are the Emperor's children.
Half of the Emperor's creation fell. That's not a very good ratio. Just imagine if half the buildings I wired up electrically just fucking exploded into a warp rift, taking out half the city with it. It really shows what the Emperor's children are. They're just violent. Half of them fall to chaos.
All of them.
Mark, just stop with that.
I will not.
Okay. The Emperor is the most blessed creature.
Most divine, blessed is he, and blessed is me for knowing of him.
You should write that down on a purity seal marker.
Cool. Well, it was a fun episode. We have some time for some call-ins. So up first, we're going to call Purge to the stage. We'll give him a hot second to get ready. Maybe Christian, Jordan, do you have any other thoughts about this before we call somebody in?
I like the Emperor's children. I like them pre-heresy and I like them post-heresy. And I look forward to building armies for both.
Mm-hmm. You like them beside you and inside you.
On top and below.
I do kind of like them in terms of like they move the story of the Horus Heresies along, and kind of give a precedence to just in terms of like the larger narrative, that like it's already been done before, that even the what is it, Horus's Legion, the 13th Legion, Sons of Horus, they weren't really the first ones to do it, and they already have like sort of a template for.
Yeah, that's kind of a fun thought. Like, this is a legion of firsts. They're the first to do many things. They're the first to get the Aquila. Yeah. They're the first to kill a Primarch. They're like the first to go full chaos. They're the first to get a full demon prince happening. They're the first of many things.
They're the first to try cocaine.
Yes, sir. That good stuff too, from the distant planet.
The first to lose their virginity.
Way to go, guys. That's something we've never done. I can't believe that slideshow about autism had 40K in it. I just think we're a bunch of like fucking autistic virgins over there using us as autistic examples. Like, whoa.
Excuse me. Okay, I have 3 children, so I've had sex at
Are you
least
sure?
3
Yeah.
times.
Christian
Wildly
is the
question.
most sexed out of all of us with his 4, and me, you wouldn't believe it, but even I've had it once. All right, I think that gave Purge enough time. Hey, yo, Purge, welcome to the show.
Hi, boys.
Good to have you.
What's up?
You guys were talking about using sonic or noise before, and there's a lot of woo-woo, but there's also been military application and police application for using it as crowd control.
Absolutely.
And there was allegedly a American embassy that was attacked that caused everyone to become nauseous. So there is actual precedence for using it as a weaponized platform.
Okay. I'll maybe debate you slightly on that. So that's the Havana virus that they call, or Havana syndrome, rather. And there have been conflicting reports about the veracity of these claims.
That's why I went with alleged.
Yeah, some people say it could just be like American propaganda, because like how would Cuba have that kind of technology? Because they're just a bunch of poor communists.
Fucking commies.
Aren't good at that stuff. Yeah, but I don't. You could be right, but yeah, I'm certain that like sound and sonic weaponry has been used in military applications. Absolutely, without a
Yeah,
doubt.
it just seems like it's something you wouldn't be able to block. And like,
Yeah, policing applications.
I think
well.
we were talking more. The woo part was like if you speak nicely to plants, they'll grow nicer. Was like the thing we were mocking.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Like I said, there is certain woo-woo when people come, or the use of or application of.
But no, sonic weapons are.
yeah, like
So
watch, I'll
Absolutely,
yell
yeah.
right now and blow thousands of people's eardrums right now. Don't make me do it. I'll fucking do it.
and then the other thing I wanted to bring up is I think the Emperor's Children sought perfection over mastery, and to me, perfection's like a endpoint, or it's finite, where mastery is more infinite because you can master your craft, but then there's going to be new classes and things that come out that you have to do to further master that craft, where you can make the perfect piece of art and then it's done. And I think maybe that might have caused their fall is because they were seeking that perfection. Once they attain that perfection, where do you go from there?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like
that's
that.
a good point.
I was gonna fight you about it, but no, I started thinking about it more. I'm like, no, I agree.
So say that again. So perfection is attainable and mastery is like, how did you word that again?
Perfection's finite.
And
Like
mastery is more of a process
yeah.
and perfection is like a destination, but obviously no one can get there.
Interesting.
And that's for once
Yeah.
the Emperor's Children thought they were perfect, it's where do you go from there? There's nowhere but down from going from there. Where if they were trying to be masters of their crafts, well, then they've been constantly improving and learning and adapting and moving forward because the goal post would keep them moving ahead of them.
Yeah, I do really like that.
Yeah. I'm just thinking in my head, if you flip them around, like if mastery is like the progress and like, yeah, they achieved mastery, but like you can't achieve perfection, but either way, you're still trying to get that. But yeah, I don't know if I agree fully with it, to be honest. I don't disagree, but I don't know if I fully agree. But
And then I would end with the greatest artist in 40K would be the person who made a statue of the Emperor out of flesh, our boy Conrad Cruz.
Get out, kick him out right now.
Kick him out, fucking kick him out. Do you want to say anything else before I kick you out? Too bad you don't get a chance. Psych.
What are you gonna do on the
Yeah,
cruise
okay.
episode?
Little editor's note here. It's Conrad Kurz, not Cruise. Cruise is a trip you take on a boat. Kurz is a name.
Are you just gonna skip that episode? No, Night Lords.
Redacted, I
We don't
think.
need it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who needs that?
Yeah. It's unfortunate because I'm looking at Jax now in the call-in section. I know I'm gonna have to boot him. I don't take pleasure out of booting you people.
That would just feed Sloanette.
My Patreon subscribers, I'm booting them all. But this is the price of chaos. So just there's your warning to you, Jax, and I'll let you get ready here. And welcome to the show.
I'm walking on eggshells, aren't I?
Yeah, you are. But you know what? The nice thing is, just don't say the dirty word, and
Okay,
you'll be
I
fine.
won't say the curse word.
Get out of here!
And to the warp I go.
So, how'd you like the episode? What'd you take away? You like Fulgrim? What's your take on perfection?
Don't have to get so philosophical with the what is perfection, but really like the Emperor's Children. They've come around on me, and since you guys were paid to do an episode on the Emperor's Children, as soon as the
On you?
Emperor's Children come out,
Come on me!
wait, what?
He's a minor. We can't say that.
Okay,
That's a serious offense. If we just did that joke.
Oh, I'm in shock now. But anyway, yeah, they've come they've come around. I'm starting to like them now that the models are out, and I'll have to buy that box of them. My poor wallet. But yeah, like I I always will have that soft spot for like Rylanor and Sol Tarvitz, like the loyalists that were truly like perfect, like Sol Tarvitz. Like
Yeah.
this is my hot take, but he was like the perfect like Astartes. He was kind, he was good to humanity, he was smart, he did logistics, he was a great warrior, he was humble, he did everything he needed to do and more, and he went out with a bang. Like
Yeah, I think that was you in the chat.
Yeah.
Then when I brought that up, that it's almost like that's what the Emperor's Children should have been aspiring to be like, is Saul. But it's like
Instead, they chose to be like Lucius.
Right, exactly, and that's like the tragedy of it. Is like they could have attained a semblance of perfection in him, but they didn't, and killed him instead.
yeah, I was about to say like it's actually like very ironic because Sol Tarvitz was perfect when he wasn't even trying to be. Whereas Lucius, Eidolon, Fulgrim, they all wanted to be perfect, but they never became perfect. Brings the two to man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's too bad. Like, I only have so much time to podcast. Like, we didn't even talk about any of the named characters. Like you said, they have a lot. Like Raylanor, Sol Tarvitz. Like Lucius is cool for what he is. Like, there's so many cool characters in this Legion.
Lucius, he's the galaxy's biggest asshole behind Erebus. Like, he betrays Sol Tarvitz. He was his friend once, so it makes it even worse. He like kills like pretty much everyone he comes in contact with, just like looking for that fight. And the only people that actually beat him, Loken, I think Sigismund and Sharokin, they never actually killed him, which is a huge shame, but also kind of good for them, or else they would have turned into him. I had to save it for the Lucius episode, but
yeah, very cool. Yeah, I love that scene, the Istvan 3 books that they did, and we've seen a couple different perspectives from a couple different legions, but yeah, kind of the relationship between Sol Tarvitz and Lucius was very fun to see how that all plays out in the books and stuff during just this epic battle where all hope is lost. And yeah, Lucius, like, yeah, he's the epitome of his legion in so many ways. Just like earlier this episode, we were talking about how the Emperor's Children, they seem to betray everyone, including the ones on their side. Like, doesn't matter if you're a loyalist or a traitor, they're kind of doing it for themselves. And yeah, like you said, Lucius betrayed Saul. And yeah, just kind of that. He just really represents that.
It's
legion.
always good to see the Emperor's Children get their comeuppance. So like Lucius is all like big talking, like, oh yeah, I'm the shit. And then Loken, or he gets in a duel with Loken, and then all Loken does is just take a step back and well, bam.
Bam.
But again,
Classic.
like Lucius then ends up suffering from that Worf effect we talked earlier. Like, you do kind of like want to have your bad guys stay menacing, but
well, they're menacing losers.
No such thing.
Any other thoughts there, Jax?
A great episode. Subscribe to the Patreon. Curse is the best.
And he's gone.
He booted himself. That's so funny. He wouldn't give me the satisfaction. That's that denial that oh man, son of a bitch. I'm shook. I'm shook it. I wish I had that power, but he's the only one who can bring himself here. Son of a bitch. That's it, Jax. You ruined my whole night. This podcast is over, Jax. But before we do, let's just do some end of the show notes. Do you guys have any other closing thoughts on the Emperor's Children?
No, I think I've said everything. Like I do like them. I like them. I like their aesthetics. I like the purple and gold is a beautiful, very like opulent color,
and white.
And white too. Yeah, it's a very like opulent color scheme. Fits with their personality. I imagine will be really fun to paint when I get around to it.
Yeah. On the next episode, we're doing the Emperor's Children in the 40k era, and then their purples turn to pinks and their whites turn to black, and it's a pretty good time. Yeah, we're gonna have a good time with that episode. Let's just do some end of the notes shout outs. I have a podcast called Lorehammer Listen to Lore. It's a podcast. It's by me. I have it. It's mine. It's called Lorehammer Listen to Lore. Go check it out. Who knows what it is until you go click it.
Wow. Set them up for a trap. Yeah, and if you like me and Jordan, we also run a Star Wars podcast called Star Lores. Come check us out over there if you want to learn all things about the Star Wars universe. Our deep takes, deep cuts into the lore, discussion about the lore, how bad Disney has butchered the lore. Yeah.
And we have one new Patreon member in the last few days. His name's Dragonborn. So thank you so much, Dragonborn. And thanks to everyone in the chat room just chatting away. You've all donated money to me too. Even every time I boot you, you still donate money. So we really do appreciate it. These shows live and die on Patreon or whatever way you support. So don't forget to go sign up. Well, Christian, Jordan, thank you so much for coming. Yeah.
Before we go, just someone in the chat there, Skeleton, says, granted, Fulgrim turning to Chaos was a surprise. Reading Heresy in order as my intro into
Yeah,
Warhammer.
okay.
That is very interesting.
Yeah, like, here's the thing. I often see many times, like, hey, I just got into 40k. What do you recommend reading? And people always say Horus Heresy. And it's the wrong fucking answer because of things like that. But at the same time, that's pretty cool what happened to him. But yeah, the Horus Heresy is like, it's not made for beginners.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, like,
so what would you recommend starting with then, if you're wanting to read the book?
It depends a lot on their faction, and if they say no faction, then I would say go read all the core rule books, not for the rules but for the lore, and then that will give you a good understanding of the universe. And after that, honestly, you can read whatever you're interested in, but the Horus Heresy it's not the starting point. Yeah, like, you know, we've talked about it before. Like, it's supposed to be a mythos that we don't know anything about. We're not supposed to know about these characters. We're getting a look behind the warp here on all these guys, but whatever.
Skeleton just says, I'm now 19 books into doing it wrong. LOL.
You got to do all 57 or whatever it is.
Yeah, keep after it, I guess.
Well, now he's in too deep. Now he's just got to finish the job.
Then skip the Siege of Terra, and yeah, carry on with your life. Pretend like this phase in your life never happened. Escape autism. You can do it. Put the book down. All right, we'll leave it on that. Christian, Jordan, thanks for joining me.
See you later.
Adios.